Good evening, everybody. Good evening. Good evening. This is the day that the Lord has made, and we are rejoicing and being glad in it. It's been a while, but it's a lot for us to talk about. So let me get my theme music, and we'll start class right away. Don't waste your time tuning in to MSNBC or CNN or FBN or anything else. Just tune in to Bethany Baptist Church, where we got the hookup to God. Let us pray. Eternal God, our Father and our Mother, we thank you for life and giving it to us abundantly. Bless us even in this encounter as we explore your word, as we explore your world. In your name we pray. Amen. Amen. I'm certainly glad that each of you thought it not robbery to be here, on this moment, on this Tuesday, which we haven't met. I was trying to do my share. I'm sorry I didn't do that earlier. So let me get my share in. And it's not too late for you to share either. And y'all know what we say, class is in session. There we go. And it's funny because I felt myself being affirmed with the stuff that I talked about on Sunday. You know, there is an ideal and understanding of trying to be first. That's why you have these news people breaking facts, breaking news without knowing all of the facts, because it's something about trying to be first and begin to say stuff. And so it was just interesting as what I had given a precursor, as it were, a tease on Sunday. As I listened to progressive radio, I heard many of my talking points. And I'm just glad I said it on Sunday, just in case somebody say I'm following somebody, even though I do. But I want to be engaged in these conversations. And remember, the way we teach civics in this class is we teach civics through the lens of current events. And what we want to say is current events is always rooted in some type of historical passage or some historical practice or some type of historical policy. So it just doesn't come out of thin air. It has been around for a while. And those who do not know history are doomed to repeat it. And so that's what we seek to do as we seek to engage in this discussion as we begin to look today. Our desire is for the next few moments is to explore with your participation. If you don't participate, I will hasten, because I know this. The question is, do you want to wrestle with this? We're going to look at the Fugitive Slave Acts. We're going to look at reparations. We're going to look at Title 42, and we're going to look at the debt ceiling and gun violence, you know. And if y'all want to talk about the other stuff that's going on extra, we can tease that out. But I think the most pressing issue that I think galvanizes our intention is what has taken place in New York City over the past few weeks. And indeed, I believe there's protests going on every week that to me harkens back to the Fugitive Slave Acts. And so when we look at the Fugitive Slave Acts, you got to look at your Constitution. The Constitution of the United States of America, you have a fugitive slave clause. And this stipulation, Article 4, Section 2, Clause 3, stated that no person held to service or labor will be released from bondage in the event that they escape to a free state. So remember, you had 13 colonies, and as the colonies began to expand, and now we have 50 states, is that as the states began to expand, then you begin to say what's free, what's slave, what's free, what's slave. Because what allowed the South to grow so strong was because they had free labor. Free labor. You'd be surprised what you can do with free labor. The North had this stuff, but they did not have the free labor. That's what allowed America to be one of the greatest countries in the world, because of free labor. Now, therefore, morality, it becomes to be an issue. And so in that regard, in terms of those free labor, people were trying to escape the South and make their way up to Canada. But even as early, I know New York loves to think that New York is so progressive, but slavery was existing in New York. Even in 1705, New York was prohibiting people from leaving the Americas to go to Canada. As early as 1705, okay? 1705, when one of the first examples of a Fugitive Slave Act that begins to take place. But the first one to be fully inculcated in the Constitution is the Fugitive Slave Act of 1793. And that actually dealt with local power. And what it allowed people to do was, as people escaped from the South, to be able to go to the North where their slavery was not legal and they could therefore claim their freedom. It gave slave owners the right to petition people to be bounty hunters to go and secure their property. Because that's what an enslaved African was, or likely that's what it was, but that's what it meant to be a slave. You were enslaved, and therefore you began to be property, and therefore the owner of the property would commission people and send out notices to say if you can come back. And one of the challenges that took place in there is that as people were trying to make money and send these enslaved back to their slavers, they could grab anybody and then say that they were a slave. Y'all know that's the movie, 12 Years a Slave. It's based upon a true story of Solomon Northup, who was from New York, tripped to go into DC, and then they got him in there and took him to Louisiana, where he was able to work as a slave for 12 years, even though he was born free. So you have those challenges with again, the 1793 Slave Act. But this happened in 1841 to 1853. That's the 12 years. But then you also have the Prig and versus Pennsylvania. And what happened in Pennsylvania, in which I kind of like this. Some of us can be so jaded that we think that all white people are bad. That's what we do. Some of us have been conditioned to really believe that. But there was a strong abolitionist movement with white people in it. Now, well, they could be against slavery, but also against equality. I like that. Can anybody tease out that difference, or you want me? There's a difference between being against slavery and also against equality. I'll go ahead, Chris.
Or perhaps when you're against slavery, you don't necessarily like the practice of slavery, but when it comes to being against equality, it doesn't necessarily mean that you want the enslaved to have the same, or former enslaved to have the same rights, or especially women to have the same rights.
There you go. And that's important to tease out, because people have a line to say, well, it's okay to do this, but that's a line too far. But for many, slavery was a line too far, but not equality. Not equality. No. And actually today we also celebrate the birthday of John Brown, the great white abolitionist, who began to participate and struggle. And actually he was more radical than Frederick Douglass. For those of us who want to look and begin to see the history, but Frederick Douglass didn't get killed. I mean, he wasn't executed. So in that regard, but you have what these things called personal liberty laws. And what happened was that people said, well, if we're going to be in Pennsylvania, in Massachusetts, in Vermont, then let the people be a jury of their peers determine whether or not we should export this person back to the South. The Supreme Court ultimately ruled that no, that federal law trumps local law, because they would then convene it, like said, Adolphus Lacey is a runaway slave. Well, let's see. And they could decide to say, no, we're not going to reward him back. So that's where the Prigg versus Pennsylvania state came. So they had Prigg versus Pennsylvania, which then led to the Fugitive Slave Act, the one that we're more familiar with, is in 1850. So my point is, I want you to see how they work till they get it right. Told you this started as early as 1705 in New York City. Then you got to 1793. Then you got the Prigg versus Pennsylvania. And now you got to the most popular, where they think they finally got it right, the Fugitive Slave Act of 1850. And this deals with federal control. And this is part of what we call the Henry Clay Compromise. Henry Clay Compromise. And in that, they compelled citizens to help return runaway enslaved. And then, interfering with the rendition of these runaway slaves, the fine increased from $500 to $1,000. I don't know about you. I told you this is 1850. $1,000 in 1850 is a whole. $500 is a whole. $100 is a whole lot of money. So they increased the fine. And then those who will arbitrate the case, check this out. The federal commissioners were incentivized to return the enslaved. So you would go to the commissioner to see whether or not you should be remanded back to where you came from, or can you be free? The commissioner got paid more money if he sent you back to where you came from. Wow, wow, wow. That's deep, that's deep. And then you have the repeal of the slave acts, of the Fugitive Slave Acts. And that what took place in 1864, which is just a year before the Civil War. And that's the point is, the 1850 compromise was designed to stave off the Civil War, but it did not last. So when we look at the Fugitive Slave Act, and I'm going to engage you in here, how does the murder, in quotes, killing of Jordan Neely remind you of the Fugitive Slave Acts?
Pastor, are you equating that to the fact that the Marine, was acting as an enforcer of the law, as if he were getting somebody as a fugitive slave?
That is correct. He deputized himself. So you got it, Gary.
I understand your thinking. I'm not sure I 100% agree with it, but I understand where you're going.
So tell me where I'm not going. I mean, like, so where are we off? This is not, again, when you look at the Fugitive Slave Act, at bottom, all we're saying is, and I showed you from 1705 to 1864 when they were repealed, is that it gave white people the power to sequester Black people, even though that they were not responsible to the state, meaning they weren't a deputy, they weren't a sheriff, they weren't a constable, they weren't a marshal, but they sought to enforce whatever law it is.
I don't want to say it sounds like a stretch, but I mean, we're talking about a homeless person being killed. I mean, that could have been, I wonder, would he actually have done the same to a white person if a white person was being that aggressive? Now, granted, I've been riding the subways, basically for going on at least by myself, going on 40 years now. And, I've been in, many times, you've had homeless people, some of them a little disturbed. They've been on the train, might have been harassing something. And heck, even one like was walking by one night and, I guess, I'm not sure what he was doing, but he was like tapped me on the top of my head rather forcefully. And if it wasn't for the person I was with on the train that night, I probably would have gone after them. But,
But you said, but they touched you.
Huh? Yeah.
But they touched you.
Yeah.
But what takes place with Jordan didn't touch nobody.
Right.
But somebody took it upon their authority. It wasn't a conductor. You didn't get off the line and get a conductor. You just decided you're going to take this into your own hands because this person was Black, homeless, and angry.
Yeah. Well, and it's not just with the person that did the Marine that did it. It's the couple people that I think helped to do it.
And that's the voyeurism. We'll add that, but I want to still with what gave this person the agency to think that he could be involved in this. That's what I'm saying. I mean, I joke about this, and I see you, Sean. And one of the things that I joke about is that sometimes restaurants, you can go there, the wait staff can be so backed up. I feel like waiting the table myself, but I don't work at the restaurant. It's not my job. So what gave this person the right to think that, and nobody, now they're trying to do this story, and I keep saying person, because what you're doing is juxtaposing, if we're facing the other way toward my board, with a Marine versus a homeless person. That's the deal. And not only that, of a Marine that was connected. His father is in law enforcement. So he's known. He somehow believed he had an agency, not only agency, he had privilege. I'm sorry, Brian, I said Sean.
Oh, good evening, everyone. Hotep. The Marine's defense was that he was protecting himself. He felt like the young man was a threat. So he took the law in his own hands and tackled him and started strangulating him. But he could have just held him until the police came. He didn't have to murder him, to really put him in that chokehold and murder. He could have held him until the police came because they was at a station already.
Right. I like what you're saying, but even before we get there, think about this. Think about that line. And that's what police say all the time. That's how they kill you. They said they thought that they were threatened. I mean, do you know how many times I'm walking and somebody clicks their door or clutches their purse? Because they don't know who I am. And some of those are members of Bethany Baptist Church. Mm-hmm. When I'm walking up, let me tell you what, when I ain't in the pulpit, a lot of our members don't know me when I'm walking up toward them. And those are facts. And so they can feel threatened. And we've been conditioned to be threatened by Black people. But now you got an animated, hungry, a loud, boisterous person. And you like, nah, I'm going to subdue this right now. Lily, and then Gary.
This is just like a question before I continue. Was he he wasn't touching anyone, right?
No, he didn't touch anyone.
Right. He was just if you really think about it, you're on an NYC subway, right? People yell and they shout all the time. This isn't anything abnormal. So if you really think about it, if you have hardly ever heard of anyone being assaulted by these loud people on the subway, what really makes you deem it a threat? And that's just a lot I think of it.
No, I like it from someone who takes the subway. You're right to pull attention to that. I mean, they come in there, they trying to ask for money. And I'm from Kansas City. At first, I used to look around and they would see me. Now I know just to ignore people. Just to ignore them with all of this noise, with all of this bravado, with all of this selling, with all of this dancing, with all of this, with their hand out, I ignore. But somebody got so mad that he decided that I'm going to, so before you say, because we're going to move to the next piece, he could subdue and let down. But what gave him the right to subdue in the first place? Gary.
Have you ever seen the movie Network?
With Sandra Bullock?
No, with Faye Dunaway and Peter Finch.
Okay, no, I didn't. That
And
was I'm sorry.
The classic line that comes out of that one, as the reporter is frustrated as anything with what's happening at the network, he gets up there and screams and tells everybody to scream out the window, "I'm mad as hell and I'm not going to take it anymore." I understand what Lily is saying. And there comes a point where I'm just tired of this. You're sitting on the subway, someone's panhandling, you give them $1 and you think, okay, that's it. And then somebody else comes to the subway and panhandles. And then the next stop, somebody else comes through. And then the first person comes back and looks at you. Why aren't you giving me any more money? I'm sorry. I'm tired. I'm done. That's probably what happened. I don't care whether they touch me or not, but I am just frustrated. I've seen people threatening on the subway. I've been with visitors and they've gotten scared because we don't know whether the person's had a knife or anything. We've gone up to the station. Okay, just stand away from the person. It's like, well, by standing away from the person, hey, they might come after me before you get back down the stairs. Or somebody said, you see the subway car and you see a homeless person move. Well, why can't I just sit here as a peaceful, law-abiding citizen and stay here and not have to worry about anybody anymore? Probably it's like, I'm sorry. I'm mad as hell and I'm not going to take it anymore.
No, I hear you, and you have a right to say that. I'm going to respond to you, and I'm going to go get to George. But it's interesting because one day, Fanta and Deacon Beckwith at our church. Now, I see that. Watch this, at our church. Because sometimes we got people that have mental challenging issues. They come in and have been disruptive. And Chris babysitted as long as he could. And then Fanta ended up missing an assignment because Fanta had to deal with him. You remember that, Fanta? Are you nodding? I mean, so what I'm saying is we didn't struggle him. We didn't call police on him. I mean, and we ain't been in a training seminar. All we knew was this dude is challenged and he just got loud. And all Chris told him to do was lower your voice. That's what Deacon Beckwith told him. Lower your voice. Don't talk that. Now, the rest of y'all at the church just turned around and just started looking like you would look on the subway. Deacon Beckwith and Fanta recognized his humanity and told him, you can't act like this right here, without laying hands on him. And he calmed down and stayed in there. We see this all the time. I know you're tired as hell, but you know better.
Right. I've also seen Deacon Hunt put somebody in a stranglehold and take him out of the church too. He literally got him in a headlock, and actually it was a woman, and take her out of church.
Yeah, don't say that, because you painting a picture right there of Deacon Hunt strangleholding women.
Point taken.
Patricia got that one. Let's be clear, because if I'm gonna stop. Go ahead, George.
Good evening. This is nothing new as far as the subways and mental illness in New York, because I worked for the subway system for like 23 years. And I started at 19 and I used to see it then, but the point being that when people do come through and ask them for money, it's like disturbing your space. And you're not trying to, but then as I'm working there and seeing, I can name some hot stations, and it's terrible. I remember when the transit authority used to come down with a unit that would clean all of them out of Second Avenue. People were living in the tunnels, but it was just a thing. It was problematic for the whole subway system. So the young man who lost his life, it really shouldn't have happened. I'm sad about that, but the calamity is that you have a man who has this hold on him. They said the time limit, which is bad, And you had other two people assisting in it. And I don't agree with that because the change of environment that's going on in New York. Before they didn't have a problem with it. Now, all of a sudden, they got to get the pencil and grab somebody on the subway. Don't they have a cell phone? Don't they know how to dial 911? The subway system has a Wi-Fi system. You could get cops there very quickly. So technology, just like with Zoom here, technology helps.
You're
But
right.
you got to look at the real big picture. It's unfortunate, and it goes back to just to touch on this other thing. The Bernie Gate, the Gets.
Yeah. Gets.
Yes.
Bernard Gets.
And like I said, I was working for the subway system at that time, and it was horrendous. But some people you can go through all 5 boroughs on the subway system, Bronx, Brooklyn. You'll see them; they'll come through. It's what do you do?
Okay, I like that. Let me get Anna. Come on in, sis.
Okay, in contrast, let me go back to what you originally started on. You said the Fugitive Slave Act. Wasn't that about financial gain also? In
Yes.
terms of what? Okay, so therefore it doesn't fit into this scenario, in my opinion.
No, well, I mean, it's both and, because what I said is the commissioner got paid, but the other person, yes, you're right, because they could deputize themselves and get a bounty for returning. So they became bounty hunters, and it was no longer an issue of the law. It was them being able to do this, and then they were able to they had their own self-interest in it. So go ahead. I'm sorry. Go ahead.
Okay, so basically, I mean, in contrast to this incident, I didn't think it was a matter of financial piece. I just felt he felt the other part that you said about the Fugitive Slave Act, the other parts of it, I agree with, in terms of I felt he can do that. And that's what he thought. But so that's why I was trying to figure out when you said it, because the money, like you said, in that time, that was a lot of money, $500 to $1,000 in those years. I would think that was a whole lot of money, but there was no financial issue here. This was just what he thought he could do and get away with it because of who he is and how he is. And like you said, his background, and he thought, well, I don't think he thought. It's just something he felt he could get away. And the other, I think several people have mentioned before, is all the other folks that was around him that saw this, okay? And I felt they were also negligent in not helping that young man.
And what ends up happening, what I want to push us with, is the same thing that happened. Remember, what gets a Black man killed typically in society at that particular time when you're talking about, and still even now, but is an uppity nigger. You being smart. So it's about putting somebody in his place. So it's okay for him to be homeless. It's okay for him to be Black, but he can't be Black and angry. Black people and Black women, Black men, you can't be angry and be Black. And to be Black, what James Baldwin tells us, is to be in a constant state of rage, and they can't handle that. Like, oh no. That's why they arrest. I would drop this up. They still putting handcuffs in New York City on 5-year-old kids. Disproportionately, 60 to 70% of the kids that have been detained, I don't care if they're Velcro. You mean to tell me you got to put handcuffs on a 5-year-old? That's sick. That's very, very sick. Lily.
I wanted to comment on what Trustee King said about basically being like sick of what was going on in the subways. Yeah, you're sick of it, and you began to rant about how you were sick of it. That's what these people on the subways are doing. They're ranting about how they're sick of how they were treated. Imagine when in the middle of your rant about how you were sick of having to experience that on the subway, someone pulled up and put you in a chokehold because they thought you were being dangerous. You got to really take it into more perspective than, oh, you're sick of it. Yeah, you want to enjoy your peaceful ride home, but in the end, everyone's going to be under terrible circumstances. That doesn't mean you can go out and murder someone about it. Would you go and put someone in a chokehold because you were just trying to enjoy your ride home? You wouldn't. So it's not really excusable. Murder is murder. And you can be upset with something you experience, but it doesn't make it just in any way.
I agree with you in the sense that I don't think he should have murdered him. I think he did go too far, but I understand why he started down the path he did. I am not in I'm not skilled enough to put anybody in a chokehold or restrain anybody. I don't have the training to do that. But I have been frustrated. I would not take my frustrations out and vocalize them, although I did do that on the street when somebody was beeping me as my mother was getting out of the car. And I literally got out of the car and looked at them and said, "Why are you trying to make me move when you see my mother getting out of the car?" And they all of a sudden backed up. So, but then I thought about it, it's like, that was a stupid thing to do, because who knows who has a gun these days. But my point was that there is a level of frustration and fear on the subway, especially as you hear, probably overreported, of crime on the subway. But there have been more incidents of violence on the subway these days. There are more people who are being shoved to the track and killed than we've ever heard before. When have we ever heard of somebody throwing a smoke bomb on the subway and shooting into a smoke bomb car? That has never happened in my lifetime. Yes, we've had a Bernhard Goetz, and so that's been, but how many, you've never seen the kind of violence and assaults that have taken place on the subway as we have in the last couple of years. So I submit that the fear level amongst the passengers is much more than it ever has been. And so the fear level reacting to anybody, I really don't care whether they're black or white. But when you see somebody who is going off and abusing you, I think that sets a trigger. Whether, he should not have been killed. That was over the top. But I think there's a sense of fear amongst the passengers of the New York City subway that has never been there before. And that's why the reaction happened.
Okay, Cheryl, Sister Lacey.
So I agree with a part of what Trustee Gary just said, right? There is a higher level of fear. I take the subway, so there is a higher level of fear or heightened awareness of it. But I 100% agree with what Lily said. It doesn't give anyone the right to think of someone as other than human and put their hands on them. I could feel threatened, but my feeling threatened doesn't give me the right to put my hands on someone. And I don't think, I haven't heard, maybe I haven't listened to it closely enough. I haven't heard that he targeted his outrage at anyone. I heard he was speaking loudly. He had outrage. He was angry about it, but he didn't target at anyone. He didn't. So I don't know what would make anyone think that they could not only put their hands on a human, but they can dehumanize them and put them in a chokehold when that person did not put a hand on them. I don't understand. And I'm I guess I'm disappointed that we can think other than. There is a huge outcry in the country right now for mental health. We're all aware of that. And so there are things you can do about mental health. You could have gotten off the train and spoken to a conductor or called 911 if you felt threatened, or if you feel threatened, leave the train. No, you don't have to, but that's what you could have done. But that's not what he did. And the people who videotaped it are equally as guilty. Equally as guilty. That's it.
Love it, love it. Back to Lily, our scholar.
I'm a teenage girl, right? I take the subway all the time. If anyone's gonna feel unsafe on the subway, it would be me, right? When I'm on the subway and I see people angrily yelling or like getting up in people's areas asking for money, if I felt unsafe, the first thing I would do is to go to someone else, be like, hey, can you do something about this? Or like something like that. What was he a Marine or whatever? If he has the power to put someone in a chokehold and keep them there, he has no reason to feel afraid on the subway. Like, if he knows he has that skill set, what is he afraid of? That man didn't fight back, and at some point he should have backed off. like after noticing that this man isn't fighting back, this man, you are clearly overpowering him. What is the goal at that point? And in the end, like we haven't heard this Marine say that someone turned to him and asked him to do anything. It wasn't any of that. So he did this entirely on his accord out of pure aggravation. Like, and that's really all it is. It's aggravation. It doesn't have to necessarily be about race, but if anything, it'd probably be about class, and that ties into race. So in the end, it's all connected, and it's just aggravation. You're angry at someone for being angry about what your government's doing.
I like that. Before I come to you, Fanta, I'll let you be proud of your daughter and her Bella education. And so, but and her mother and her grandfather and great grandfather, that good legacy of being able to fight for justice. It's interesting what Lily had said about that. But and I'm gonna push her and I'm gonna tease this narrative. His name is Neely. I forgot his name. What's his name? Whatever. But what is being shaped at is the Marine versus the homeless person. And that's the narrative. And therefore, the Marine gets the benefit of a doubt. But actually, I think to whom much is given, more is required. One of my nieces is a doctor. And I asked her, why didn't she get a license plate that's like you can get MD license plates? And she says, oh no, because if I have that MD license plate, if I see an accident, I'm obliged to stop and do something with it. So if we want to keep calling him a Marine, then he has to live up to be able to adapt, to improvise and overcome. If not, he was just an angry white man who was fed up and couldn't take it no more. Well, I don't want to call him a Marine because he didn't act like a Marine. He acted like a discharged, disgraced Marine. Fanta.
Thank you. That's a great lead in, because for me, if we're going to put a handle on it with the Marine as a service person in the United Armed Services, any branch, you are officially dutied and responsible to serve and protect us, the United States citizens. That's your number one job. And if you are on a train with someone who deems a threat, yes, you should want to protect those around, but you are trained in ways to do that in a lot of different ways before lethal things happen. So let's get to the fact that he felt threatened, whatever. He needed to subdue the man. At what point in time do you realize that your anger is the chokehold and you are not even listening to the people saying, hey man, all right, now you about to kill him. Like those cries, those comments, you're in your rage as a person who's dealt in rage, that you're not even thinking about what you're doing, which then goes into a big problem of we don't address the mental health issues of our service people sometimes coming home with the PTSD. I don't feel as though necessarily it may have been a race thing. I believe it's a culmination of things as to why this went all the way left. And it all goes into the United States issues with and how it overlooks mental health.
And when you're hitting that, I like you. Thank you, Fanta. And when you talk about them overlooking, part of us growing in society that lets us, when you write first, the kid learns how to write like this. Take a crayon and just go on the board. Eventually they learn how to hold on to it. And, they start out like this, and then you can go like this, and then you get closer to get detail. And that's called, what I'm arguing is learning context. Now, how you gonna be you ain't an 84-year-old man, you ain't a 94-year-old man, even if you're a Superman. We done just went through George Floyd. We done just went through Eric Garner. We done already seen these things repeatedly take place with people doing it, but now you act like this is your turn. That's the piece that I'm wanting to tease out, that you took it upon yourself. Now, if we're going to extrapolate, Fanta, and say it's PTSD, what if his child is banging on toys or his wife is doing something? Do you run and grab your wife or your kid because they're making all of that noise? That's to me, and those are the things that have happened. And you're right, they're committing suicide at a higher rate and these type of things that are taking place. But it ultimately takes place with that of privilege. And to go with what Gary had said, and I like what Gary has said. Gary was in Lily's question. Gary is in a place that Gary could vent. Gary could vent to us about previous events right here. A homeless person has no space to vent, an unhoused person. And when you talk about powerlessness, and I want y'all to see when Tupac was released from jail, and he was just so mad, all he could do was spit. That's how powerless he was, because all he was in control of was his spit. And that's what we got to do. There is agency in even to be angry, because sometimes you all know, again, you're penalized by being Black and angry. Because all I'm just saying to you, if he took the train often, he's seen many people like that. And I will guarantee you, I bet you $1 to donuts, that wouldn't happen to a white boy, period. It don't happen. It don't happen. It don't happen. George.
You know, it's the same thing here in Philadelphia. You know, it's the infrastructure what they have, but it's really not set up. You know, the agencies really are supposed to collaborate and come together. And I mean, it's supposed to be something that oversees it. And I remember the governor Holcomb, she had came out with something like that to intercept people like that. But it's been an ongoing problem. It's nothing new. It's been there, you know. So
right, it's nothing. But here's my last point. Then we're gonna get off of this, because we're all angry about this. But can you see the White House just came out with a statement today? Hochul and the mayor, they don't want to say nothing. Why are they afraid to say that this man was killed? He was murdered. Why are they afraid? Am I being irresponsible?
Soft on crime.
Okay. Anyone else want to chime in on that? I mean, just think about it.
Their constituency. They have to have a constituency of all people.
Right. And watch this, which means they have a constituency that says he deserved what he got. That's the point I want us to understand when we're voting for this. They don't, man, this is crazy. This dilutes votes, because what young people want, that I know the most, is have people of conscience and integrity. And what we continue to see is the people that we keep putting back in there is just shopping for their constituency and is afraid to be able to take a stand. And the person that came out, now Jumaane never called the mayor out by name, but Jumaane was talking about this from jump. You know, and mayor, who is a former police officer, what do you mean you need to investigate? And here's all that needed to happen. Homeboy should have been arrested. He could have been released. That's what would have happened in Aubrey's situation. He had a conversation and just left. That's not good. And that's a double standard. And that's what's happening with this. That happened in Kansas City in Kansas City. Remember, you got the wrong doorbell. When the person who rang the wrong doorbell picking up his brother, that person was never arrested or charged. He would just ask questions and then released. And then now you got to go and engage in protest to get this person at least charged. Because here's the point, and our sister Jennifer Jones Austin had said that, you know, at a minimum, could be recklessness. Maybe it's not murder, but he was reckless in that aspect. And Gary, when you're talking about this other piece, sometimes when remember you're coming off the Bruckner and those people will be there selling stuff or sometimes trying to wash your windshield wiper, and you can be mad, but if you ran one of them over, you going to jail. As long as they threaten you. I mean, so that's the piece that I kind of want. I want us to just we're angry at this white boy. Be angry at our officials that why we're so slow, because we know if that was so. Fanta, I know you're saying that it didn't necessarily take the place, race didn't necessarily matter in terms of the homeless man, but I'm saying race mattered in terms of the executor, because white men believe that they have privilege to be able to do that. That's and what happens is you get in trouble, black man, when you start acting like a white man.
Yes.
So,
Yes.
so that's mine. And now we're seeing this aspect like, wow, this should be a slam dunk. It's like, wow, what we talking? What else is there to investigate? So that's my challenge. We can move on for that, because I'm still staying with race. What my girls say, I got short time, but I'm gonna keep it real. So we're gonna move from the Fugitive Slave Acts to reparations. I'm gonna still do Title 42, a little debt ceiling, but what do you all, reparations, a system, and we talked about this before, a system of redress of egregious injustices are not foreign to the United States. Native Americans have received land and billions of dollars for various benefits and programs for being forcibly exiled from their native land. And so when we're looking at this aspect of redress, you all see that the governor signed in California a bill that allowed for a commission, and they met in Oakland. And as they met in Oakland, they came up with a proposal to give every African American who has lived uninterruptedly in California up to today, it would be $1.2 million if that person was 71 years old. There was a formula. But right now, if you're 71 years old and you lived in California from whatever 71 from 2023, you would be eligible to receive $1.2 million. And in that regard, when you're playing politics, remember Gavin Newsom wants to run for president. And what Sister Lacey just said before, while majority of African Americans want reparations, the overwhelming majority of white folk do not. So, but yet the reparation movement is getting bigger and bigger, because is it a financial decision or an ethical decision?
Both.
Okay, both. They're both. And so you with this aspect, the guy from Kentucky, the minority leader, his name escapes me. What's his name?
Mitch
Mitch
McConnell.
Yeah, Mitch McConnell said, you know what? Mitch McConnell said this, and pay attention, hear me clearly. I wish I had the clip. Mitch McConnell said, we need not be, it's a futile effort to be engaged in talking about reparations for something that happened 150 years ago that nobody here has experienced. Somebody said he was around 150 years ago. And that's the problem that we have. Can somebody push me further before you put these quotes in? Because we just make reparations just around slavery. Patricia.
So, Pastor, you were saying that they were saying, why would they give us reparation if we weren't around in that time, in that era? But what has happened over 100 years ago, we're still living it today. Because of what happened, we still are paying the price for it. And it may not, people may not see it as that, but that's the way it is. You know, that's like how the guy got killed on the train. It's because white people think that they are superior to us and they can do what they want, but it shouldn't be like that, you know?
Okay, I like it. Anyone else? Go ahead, Beck.
Okay, it's not just I mean, yes, it's reparations, but I mean, there are other issues too. I mean, yeah, okay, I get it. We aren't around then. However, our descendants were around, and businesses that when you talk about places like Tulsa, when you talk about Rosewood, we had families and thriving businesses that, were destroyed, and reparations, yeah, it is a way to I guess formal way of sorts to say, I'm sorry for what happened. How can we here's something to try to make things a little better. And also in like some of these cities here, trying when so-called progress was being made when they were building highways, how they basically tore town, cities apart, divided cities. Like I'm down here in Richmond, and one of the areas that was torn apart when they were building 995 was Jackson Ward, which was a thriving Black area in Richmond. And they're trying to find ways, I guess, to try to repay or try to reconnect that area.
Okay. I like it. I'm gonna come back to you because you hit some stuff. I'm gonna show you all, and it's in my notes. We already got my notes before they drop those in there. Lily.
I agree with what everyone else said so far. And just the claim that we aren't living through it, it's false because modern day slavery still exists. But that's besides the point. It's a huge part of reparations is the fact that everyone else in America had this start, but because of our family, like being on the plantations, not being able to be landowners until like hundreds of years after everyone else was able to, it's like everyone else had a head start and we don't have any form of equity within like our races.
Okay, I love it. Arena.
Can I say something?
No, but you got to be next. Arena had her hand up, so you can be next after Arena.
All right.
So in terms of reparations were originally supposed to be paid out to former slaves when we talk about 40 acres and a mule, and it was never paid out. Every other ethnic group, from Japanese to Jewish people to whomever you discuss, were paid for the rapes, the murders, the kidnaps, the free labor, the forced labor that happens to that group, except for African Americans. It doesn't matter if we were slaves or not. We're descendants of the slaves. And since that time, we've experienced the repercussions of it. We've experienced Jim Crow. We've experienced redlining. We haven't been allowed into schools. We've been abused in schools. We've been not given jobs and promotions. We've been neglected in so many different ways that it doesn't matter if we were alive in there or not. So Mitch McConnell's comment is absurd. And it really makes no sense for him to even say that. Obviously we weren't. And anybody can look around and look at any Black neighborhood and compare it to any white neighborhood, and you will see the difference, the economic differences. You will see the educational deficits. You will see the jobs and the housing, the dilapidated housing. You'll see the crime. You'll see all of that, all of the pain that has happened since then, because we were never given the reparations that should have been paid for us to rebuild and get back on our feet as Black people.
Okay, absolutely. I'm gonna clarify you, and then I'm gonna let Calvin come in. Is that 40 acres and a mule was a recommendation from General Sherman. It was never an executive order. It was never executed on behalf of the Congress in that regard. And so is even though we say it and it would have been promised, because all generals, traditionally, the Marshall Plan is named after General Marshall, which rebuilt Europe. But General Marshall can't do it by himself. It had to be legislated. And what the 40 acres and a mule was, is that they were trying to disseminate some of that because the federal troops were in charge. So that's what that compromise that took place, the Tilden Hayes Compromise, that then cooked the federal troops out so that even when they start giving them some of the land, when the federal troops were no longer there to protect them, they ran them back out. So I just wanted to, I mean, what you said is absolutely right. I just wanted you all to see a fuller picture as to what had taken place. They were starting, and that was the compromise of playing to a different constituency, all about being elected. All about being elected. And therefore, the federal troops came out of the South. And then when the federal troops came out of the South, the persons that, again, even as we talk about this fool in New York City, that he might be exposed, it's only been 5 people that been exposed. 1 in Philadelphia, Trafficant in New Jersey, and then the other 3 were those who were part of the Confederacy, and they were expelled. And so what ended up happening is that when after the Civil War, and that's why we engage in this, so we can begin to tease this out to see how they then begin to be sheriffs, how they begin to be magistrates, judges, senators, congresspeople, mayors. But once the federal troops left, all of that stuff was lost. And then that's when you had the biggest form of vigilantism taking place, which was the KKK. Because they're not an arm of the state, but they believed that they had the right to exercise their power on behalf of the state in that regard. Calvin.
Yes, the reason I think that we'll do this money is because my grandfather, he died when I was 12 years old. He was 86 years old when I was 14. He was 86. His daughter, which was my mother, she died at the age of 71. Then her husband, which was my father, he died at the age of 86 here in New York. I brought him up here and he lived. So I'm positive that we should have some of that money. But my grandfather, which my mother's daddy, I was raised on 27 acres of land that he, I guess, somewhere or another, he got hold of it because his name was Chapman. He got hold of this 27 acres of land, him and his wife, which was Elizabeth. And then when I came along, they gave it over to his daughter and her husband bought it from him. Then I was raised on the 27 acres of land. But I still think, because my daddy used to go out and work for $50 a week in the logwoods. And I know he ain't getting nothing for that. 50, all us blacks that were raised in the South on those farms, the people that had farms or that had to live on those farms, we should get that restoration.
Well, and I love what Arena had said is mine is I want to help you all engage in the dialogue, because the dialogue is not just slavery, it's the effects of slavery, which after slavery, it was Jim Crow. And what Deacon Beckwood talked about is that in Jim Crow, then they began to not allow you to move in certain neighborhoods and prevented you from going to certain schools. And then when you get out of Jim Crow, then you had redlining, which is how Chase Manhattan Bank and all of these things, which is very interesting. The worst bank in the world toward Black people is Wells Fargo. Can you believe that Bishop Jakes is in a partnership with them? I'm just saying this. It's like, pay attention in this aspect. Likewise, even with Chase, now you can say you can't escape it, but those are the redlining, mean that the banks would not lend money to you. And so therefore they prevented you and then gave the deal to the white person. You had housing covenants that wouldn't allow them to sell the house to a Black person. Environmental racism to put the empowerments, the dumpsters, and all of those things in our neighborhood. That why you think we have the highest form of cancer and asthma and all of that stuff that takes place. You even have what else did I have? And then what Chris said best was eminent domain. They just came in and intentionally, and let's be clear, we can do a class on what Robert Moses did, destroying Black community, building New York City Park, Central Park destroyed a Black community, a thriving Black community. Lincoln Center destroyed a Black thriving community. Those people were just moved out. They weren't given anything. So mine to you is that we ain't got to just go back to slavery. You can just go back to 15 minutes ago and see how systemic racism still has its play in that regard. Mine is just to have a dialogue because what they'll say is, well, that wasn't me. It wasn't my ancestors. Because again, yeah, Robert Moses was very evil, very evil. I mean, to play off that stuff, but that's the deal to be able to see. And now here's the problem that we do have. But when you're looking at $1.2 million, that looks scary. Even though you say we're due it, question is you can be due it, but can you afford it? Now, is that a discussion that we ought to be having in? I believe I should be getting more than what I'm getting. Question is, but can we afford it? Those are real issues. Because now there's a laughing stock. Like, ain't no way they're going to give $1.2 million. So Evanston did it different. Evanston said if you were a member of Evanston, lived in Evanston between 1919 to 1969, they set aside $25,000 for you to do housing related things, meaning pay off a mortgage, put a deposit on a mortgage, refinance your house, fix your house. They chose it in a different way as opposed to a cash payout, because they were linking it to the way that people were unfortunately discriminated against in Evanston. And somebody would say, well, why 1919? Well, because Chicago was thriving at that time. And then, Gary, what happened in 1918?
Now you got me on that one. Other than the war ended and the troops came back home and probably
The Great Chicago
Fire.
The fire. So that they had to leave Chicago. And they went up to Evanston and pushed the people out that were there. And so now that's a historical thing. The same thing that can take place in Tulsa. Mine is you go with what and somebody might say I'm an incrementalist, but again, the results took place. You can prove, and that's why they're in Greenwood, in Tulsa. They are bringing lawsuits right now. They got 2 living residents that are over 100 years, and the lawsuit is being filed in their name to be able to get restitution for the churches that were burned down, the hotels and the houses and all of those type of things. And it can be, because, just think about it. People are dying right now. What made us decide that people that died in the World Trade get to be paid? They get paid millions of dollars. But if your daddy or your uncle or your mama was in Vietnam and they lost their life in Vietnam, you ain't got nothing. World War II, you ain't got nothing. And these were fighters, but it's called political pressure. And so therefore there is a real political pressure to be able to do some things. Now, mine is I'm more inclined to little things like that as opposed to money, but I ain't mad with people who say get the money. Princeton Seminary participated in slave trade. And in response, Princeton Seminary is giving up $27 million in scholarships, curriculum reforms, and social initiatives, and $1 million a year in perpetuity, meaning forever. That's what they committed to. What the ask was they wanted 15% of the endowment. And so the point is, because you can hear these things happening again, when you go to an Ivy League graduation, now they want to recognize the space. They did this at Matt's graduation. They'll do it at Cam's graduation. Well, we want to now just pause and thank God for this space, recognizing the abuse that's taken place. And then part of that apology, they have giving some money. Some of us say it ain't enough. But the point is, I'm saying those are the different efforts. Lastly, and I'll get you, Lily, is I sat in on reparations conference, and to know how many churches that can document, particularly the Episcopal Church, which is a very rich church, and the Presbyterian Church, that those churches were built by slaves. And so now it's like, or enslaved. It's like, so what's your response to it? It ain't just about asking for forgiveness. What are you going to do? But when you start at $1.2 million, again, if you're talking about, and then some of us got mad. I think Fanta said this, or Chris. Remember the black family that they took the beach from? They got the beach back and then they sold it. Did y'all know that? The black family that they took the beach via intimate domain and stole it from them. And then once they finally got control of it, they sold it. Lily.
I wanted to say a huge part of the reparations thing that really makes it hard for us to be able to receive them is a lot of our community isn't like financially literate. Like they're not good with money. And I hate to bring I'm not bringing my community down, just pointing it out because of like our lack of resources. A lot of us don't know what the best source of reparation would be. A lot of people want cash. And in reality, like if we're asking for reparations, what we should be asking for is something like a house, like housing, land. All of those would be so much more beneficial than just getting some money or a check. Because if you have a house, you're setting your whole family up, you're setting your whole lineage up for success. They won't have to worry about paying mortgage, they won't have to worry about paying rent. Imagine how much more money they could save like that, creating generational wealth. But if we're just handed a cold hard check, we're gonna cash it out, spend some stuff, we're gonna start buying a house, won't be able to finish it because if they do give us money, it's not gonna be enough to buy a whole house. And it would end up just going to nothing, which is probably what they would do. They'll give us a check and they'll be like, here's your reparations, because they know a lot of us would be putting it to waste.
Well, no, you're right. You're not putting us down. And again, most of it is a classist argument. And that's why they all argue for most of the stimulus money that came out went right back out. People didn't save it to their checking account. They went and spend it. And so I forgot, I think it was Amina or Reese Colbert said, even if they gave us $1 million, then a chicken sandwich would cost $100,000. I mean, it's like that stuff can just happen. And Reese's funny if you follow her. But in that regard, what I just want to say is like, it's about being effective. And sometimes being effective ain't necessarily being the most right or the most ethical. It's about what you can get through in that particular regard. And so what Lily was talking about, again, that's why you ain't even heard about Evanston. Evanston, they doing a 25. They found a particular area and you can remedy it. And yes, we still got certain mental effects from slavery. It's in your veins. It's in there. And we certainly want to deal with those. But that's just like us. I think DC should be a state too. But that ain't happening with this current Congress. Neither is Puerto Rico. So do I give up on it? No, I'm beginning to teach about these processes because now what again, and this is what you want to pay attention to because this is civics. In civics, we talk about government and what they're trying to do. The way they have handicapped Kamala Harris, just making her seem like an airhead who don't do nothing. Now they're trying to box in Gavin Newsom, who is a rising star governor. Remember, they done took down Andrew Cuomo, and he helped him. Be clear. He helped him. And now Gavin Newsom, governor of California, big, that's again, big state people try to be governor of Florida, governor of New York, governor of California. Those are governor of Texas. Those are the people that come and see because they already got the way the electoral college is. They already got a good solid base. So they want to just take Newsom out because now they're trying to show how ridiculous this is and dare him to embrace it. And if he says this is too high to make Black people police him and say, oh no, you're going to do this. But yet the state is already 220, I think it's $22 billion in debt. Somebody do the research for me, but I'm like, oh my God, this is a trap. This is a bear rabbit, briar patch. This is a trap. This is a trap. So I wanted to just drop that out because the news just came out about that. And then also within the news that we see is Title 42.
There you go. That's what I want to hear.
Title 42 dates back to 1944 law, known as the Public Health Act, which granted the U.S. authorities emergency powers to prevent the spread of disease. And so what Trump did was he used that in that time to be able to declare a health crisis to prevent anybody from coming across the border. So he was able to stop that. And Joseph Biden and others has said it was bad while Trump has done it. But yet Biden did not want to stop it. He's like, because it did stop. But now it expires, I believe, on Friday. And so now you got about 5,000 people crossing the border, think about this, the southern border. So it's going to police up to about 10,000 people trying to cross the southern border to be able to come forth in here. And hence, I'm still getting calls if our church is available to let asylees be able to stay in our fellowship hall. Because now they're about to bring them, that what these southern governors are trying to do is to not necessarily have northern people say it's something wrong with us. So they want to ship them up to, particularly cities that got black mayors is where they're wanting to ship.
That's right.
Yeah, they want to be able to ship them up without necessarily being able to plan. But immigration is a federal policy, but it cannot be dictated by fiat, meaning executive order. It means that Congress needs to come together to come up with some type of plan. But the last time we had comprehensive immigration reform, I believe, was underneath Ronald Reagan. Can y'all believe that? And now all we has got issues, whether or not they're dreamers or Bill Clinton, we had the dreamers that could come in this regard. And what does it mean to seek political asylum? And some people are coming here seeking a better life. And the point that I want us to understand is that while these numbers go up, these people come through Mexico, but they're not from Mexico. These people are traveling hundreds of miles from Venezuela and Ecuador, places that we have disabled, places that we put, again, I told you all before, let's be clear, America's hands are not clean, including our favorite president, regarding who is president of Ukraine and who is president of Venezuela. American foreign policy was able to put the American candidate in there against the wishes. Again, it was challenged. Hell, Trump challenged his election, but yet that's what happened. Just do a simple search. I ain't got to drop all the facts in there. Maduro and Zelensky were put in power, but they were put in power under questionable authorities that take place. And therefore, since they were in there, the governments have been destabilized and undermined. And now you create war in Ukraine, and then you got people fleeing from Venezuela. These people come from Venezuela and Ecuador. They ain't coming from Mexico. They ain't coming from Panama. In that regard. But now Title 42 opens it up. So it looks like it's just kind of crazy, but all they want to do is just try to cross the border. But all Trump did was found a loophole, found a medical crisis, and just said, you know what? Y'all can't come in here because you might have a disease. But now that has been resolved, you can't use that anymore. And so now America still is affirming, and these persons are coming in. Now, remember, they're coming in while their cases are being heard. And as their cases are being heard, should they get asylum, if they connect them with a family member or something like that, that's what the place takes. That's what ends up happening. But also we are in the process of setting up different sites where they can apply for asylum without coming to the United States of America. The dangerous part about this, what we get lost on is there are many jobs that there is an underground economy that uses immigrant labor. particularly to pick strawberries, to pick oranges down in Florida, in Arizona, in Texas, is very, very huge. And even in meat packing. And that's why what you got up there in Idaho and in North and South Dakota, where you have the meat packing districts, where they were up in there, that they made those people still go to work in the midst of COVID. Working still. I mean, can you believe right now, you still got people, I think the minimum wage, federal minimum wage of the United States of America is still $7.50, something like that. Crazy. But guess what? You can get somebody that can work for that. And that's the game. And it just ain't happen across the border. It also happens in our Caribbean. See, those of us, we pastor this church, we worship in this church. There are many in our family that have come over here, and what they have ended up doing is overstaying their visa, overstaying their stay. And now they can't leave, because if they leave, they have to go to the back of the line. So then you go to, watch this, how this fits into this gun violence. The guy that did the killing, who was a Hispanic, but yet he was a white supremacist. They said, how can he be Hispanic and a white supremacist? I said, ask Justice Thomas. You can hate your own people and still be a race. I mean, self-hate does not mean that you, because again, the definition of whiteness is a construct. And so now you begin to see this, and I've been in these most liberal contexts, and I'm with people, I'm with Muslims. I was with this is no lies, with a Muslim imam, and I was with a Hispanic pastor, and they were ashamed in when we do what's called one-to-ones in our discussion, to be able to talk about how many people in their congregation voted for Donald Trump. And the reason why is because they immigrated the right way. And these other people are just coming in, cutting the line. It's a fair argument, but that's how they're against it. They're like, oh no. Oh, Donald Trump received a whole lot of Hispanic community, whole lot of Black community. And even though he was indicted today, that won't affect nothing. That won't affect nothing. Come on, my brother.
Me? You got me coming up?
Yes, sir.
I was going to say that Mayor Adams, that's another thing he is complaining about to the government. He wants these migrants to be able to go to work and not just for the city to take care of them. He wants the government to lift their ban of not being able to work. There's so many days that they can't work until the government gives them the okay or does some kind of paperwork or something. But Eric Adams wants them to be able to work.
Yeah, Brian,
they're here.
You're right about that, and part of that is paperwork and bureaucracy and the foolishness like that they're trying to do. The thing that I do know about that community that is coming over here, I tell you what, they can build me a garage, fix my closet. I mean, they're skilled set. And ironically, they come over here and then send money back home. So really, they're coming here to try to find a job. And so therefore, you don't want that to be able to take place. So in some ways, it then begins to be an undercurrent. But he's absolutely right. But the way our public service, our public social system is set up, it ties into the debt ceiling, is set up, is that you almost got to be totally indigent to be able to get any assistance. We don't want to help you. We just want to, if you poor, remember, if you got a little money, what they tell you, if your mama, you better sell that house before 7 years, or they going to make you sell it. You can't get visiting house services and all these things on the government if you wait too long. So
they're dying to work. They'll do anything. They work for $3 an hour, something. I mean, they weren't making nothing in Venezuela. They're dying to work.
Well, that's correct. And the problem is what you're saying is because they work for $3 an hour, then that you find that abusive, and that's how you get the smuggling ring to smuggle them over here, over against trying to make it a legitimate process for people to be able to come over here and work. And all I'm just saying is it's going to get worse before it gets better, because it is no incentive to stop it. And yes, it does bring wages down in some aspect because they can work for free, but they only work for free if they are undocumented. They're documented, you can't get them for free labor because now they know their rights and what they would be entitled to, you know. So that's one of the challenges. Calvin, you were saying something?
Yeah, I was saying you go down to Notion Avenue or to all of the Home Depot, and those guys are asking for $250, $200 a day to work. You can't get nobody to work down there for $100.
Yeah.
You can right now with your car and get 3 guys and bring them out for $100.
Yeah,
you stay there, won't get in your car.
No, not at all. No, you're right. You're right.
Well, they're very organized.
They have the skill set, but yet, so we have this debt ceiling that's taking place, and what the Republicans want is 4.5 for a $1.5 trillion increase. They want $4.5 trillion in cuts over 10 years. And in this, they want to expand work requirements for food stamps and Medicare recipients. And so once again, we see this demonizing as that people are just gaming the system. I mean, that they have to work for food stamps and medical recipients. And my question that I have here, and this will be our last question, is there a difference between corporate bailouts versus social assistance? Think about this. After 9/11, they put a 9/11 surcharge on airplanes. Did they give that back? 9/11 been long gone. We still paying for that stuff. We bailed out the banks, and the banks are still doing this same. Now Trump let go some of the regulations, but you still going through the same stuff. The banks ain't been required to do anything. And then check this out. The fool, the Nazi in Florida said he's now passing bill that will say, oh, shucks, that's what I get for doing that.
So you said that the Chinese can't buy any land.
The Chinese can't buy any land. That's passed, but also dealing with work. I mean, oh, well, I forgot it. It's going to come. But, oh, here it is. You can do what's called ES, I think it's G, but the investment people in the state cannot make financial decisions based upon race, environment, or social initiatives. They're just so you can lose your job for being pressured not to invest in a company that is polluting the Florida coastline. No more environmental justice. This is crazy. So you put requirements on them and requirements on Medicaid and food stamp recipients, and then now Disney, because you say Disney is woke, but nobody else no bankers get requirements. And that's the point of playing politics with these type of things. And the sad part is because we're so evenly divided that it's just hard to win. It's hard to win in this particular type of world, that therefore the people whom we like and voted for hedged their bets regarding the death of a homeless, angry black man. And here's the point. If you don't think if nobody was protesting, there would not be any investigation, period. These are facts right now. And so just like we're doing that, I'm saying we got to continue. If nobody's protesting, you're not getting any type of reparation. You know, if nobody's protesting, there's nothing going to be done in terms of what takes place with the asylum seekers and where they go and how it's enforced. I left this off for Title 42. It's called SCOTUS, Supreme Court of the United States. And therefore, you have a case called Chevron versus Natural Resource Defense Council. And so while we are all focusing on Justice Thomas, is that here the Supreme Court is now beginning to view out what is the difference between policy versus statutes. A statute is an act or a law, and it is intentionally vague, and it leaves the executive branch the authority to interpret how it works. So, for example, when Congress approved the PPP, it was up to the Small Business Administration to determine who was able to get X, Y, and Z. Now they're wanting to take that out. Yeah, so that's what they're considering right now, based upon Chevron, because what they're arguing is that unelected bureaucrats are determining the direction of the country. Oh, guys, it's a lot of stuff that's going on. And I just want to make sure that you're informed and create a space for us to see this and know when you get an attorney, when you talking to Hakeem Jeffries, Leader Jeffries, or to Governor Hochul or Assemblywoman Zinnerman, that you can ask the particular question. I mean, we're talking about all this stuff on mental health, but they didn't, on that budget, they didn't increase mental health, because all they were concerned about was bail reform. That's all they were concerned about, because that was the scary boogeyman issue. So when they come and they want to talk, that's what I'm talking to them about. And that's what I'm wanting to empower you to just ask the question to them. Don't just take a picture, ask the question. All right, questions, comments, observations?
Well, I can say,
Go
let
ahead.
me say, I got on the train. I started riding the train in 1965. I rode the train I rode the train up until 2006, and I never had a problem on the train. I never even seen a fight on the train. Those whole years from 65 until 2006. That's how long I rode the train.
Gotcha.
I still ride it when I go up to the doctor's office up 47th Street. But I never seen people just, like where nobody would just jump on nobody where this guy like he just did. I never seen nothing happen like that. I don't know where this guy came from.
Yeah. No, I hear you.
And in 65, it was almost, in 65, it was almost fun to ride the train. We were like kids hanging off of the back of an airplane flying. That's how.
In 1965, weren't you a kid?
I was in 65. I was about 22, 23 years old.
I'm just messing with you. I like what Debbie Daniels had posted in the chat. Just in case you all don't look at that, one of the aspects that we took, she says, look at the census ethnic breakdown. Are you white or Black, Hispanic? Worldwide cultures do not see humanity of Black Americans. And so it's paying attention to this piece. But then when we're talking about the aspect of reparations, it's important for you to search your own history. And again, that's the way it's going to be won, empirical. It ain't like, again, because now what they end up doing is you group all oppressed people together. People that are oppressed in Haiti are different from people oppressed in Jamaica and that were in South Carolina, as opposed to those who were in Illinois. It is different. And that's the point to tease out in that regard. And that's how you can have an intelligent conversation about this. That's all I want to do, is equip you to be able to speak and act for yourself and raise and ask questions. So I certainly thank you all for your time. I hope you're able to join us on tomorrow. Next Tuesday. I don't think we are. Yes, we're no good on Tuesday. So I'll let you all know when we're back. I'm just so glad that God is, despite all of these challenges, there'll be another doctor in my family as Cameron does her graduation on Tuesday and Wednesday. And so I'll be involved in those celebrations, celebrating Cameron as she becomes Dr. Cameron Alexandra Lacey. I'm very excited for her in that regard. And reparations is that they could just pay that bill, And then part of that, and when she left out medical experimentation, which then leads for the birth for her, for some and all those young ladies to be able to go into midwifery, wanting to make a difference in terms of maternal health. So we're fighting, but we got to be nuanced in that regard. So I thank you all. Deacon Beckwith, can you close us in prayer?
Eternal God, we thank you for this day. We thank you for this time that was spent together as we continue to learn, to discuss, to break down what it is that's going on and try to figure out, well, even if we can't figure out ways to solve them, we can have discussions, and we never know what kind of solutions will come out of these discussions, whether they go to a higher level and be worked out. Everything we do, everything we trust in begins with you, Lord. So we just ask that you help us continue to live and do the right thing. Now, bless us, Lord, as we dismiss from the space, but never from your presence. It's in the mighty name of Jesus that we ask it all. Amen.
Amen. Amen.
Man,
God bless you
Yep.
all.
right.
Good night.
Good night.